My name is Sarah Burke. I am Education and Training Program Coordinator at Ontario One Call, and we are happy to sponsor and introduce the Office to Residential Conversion Opportunities and Challenges session. Your speakers for today's session are Marc-Andre Richer, Adrienne Matani, and Terry Young. Please welcome them.
So we'll just start with introducing ourselves. My name is Adrienne Matani. I work for Smith & Anderson here in Ottawa. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I've worked on 3 office to residential conversions myself, and we'll chat about it more shortly. Anyone else?
Sure, Marc-Andre Richer. I'm with Linebox Studio. We've done 2 office to residential conversions in the downtown core. One has been completed, the other is in construction mode right now. So we have, got a lot of experience, and hopefully we can share some of our experiences.
My name is Terry Young. I'm with KRP Properties, and I have half of a project. 25%. I got a demo permit. So I wouldn't say it's a full 100%, but I'm good at 25. So we're just in that phase of going through the pains and the anguishes, what's good, going well, what's not so going well. And so, yeah, it's a really, really fun project. I certainly don't have the depth that the smart people here at the table do, but I do have a version of where I'm going through. So I'm going to try to explain that too today.
Yeah. So do we want to start with pictures?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead,
Mark?
Sure. I don't know if the clicker works or not.
See.
So our first project was actually 473 Albert. It's CLV Group was the owner, or bought the building in around 2019, just pre-pandemic. And obviously converted that. It was a government building, vacant at the time, or I'm going to say majority vacant at the time. So we turned that. It was a 1960s building. We had to demolish all of it inside, other than structure. Some mechanical items,
yeah.
which you can definitely talk about. But in the end, converted that to 158 units, all residential rental apartments, mix of bachelor, 1 bedroom, 1 bed plus den, 2 bedroom, not 3 bedroom, but just to keep a steady, basically variation of suites for the client. And basically, yeah, you see there some before photos and after photos. So again, 1960s brutalist building. Had to make it interesting. At the front in the lobby, we ended up cutting out some of the floor panels there to make it a double height lobby. So there was a lot of structural implications to that, reinforcements as well too. But that was the first one that nobody knew about, and we were able to make it work. So
yeah. And just like I was mechanical on this project as well, so just the challenges, we said structural, we opened up a double height space, but also, as you can imagine, we added a lot more washrooms to this unit, or to the building. Like every unit needs to get washrooms. That's a lot of structural holes in a building. So we made really good friends with structural. I learned a lot about how structure works, how reinforcing works. But there was a lot of things to even consider for ventilation. We had to integrate it into the existing openings and the facade. And and we also tried to keep as much as we could for the mechanical, which was mostly boilers, I think, for that one. No, not for that one.
Not much, but to be honest, I think it was pretty much gutted out.
Yeah.
Almost completely. There's some gas lines.
And if you think of the age of the building, like a lot of the mechanical equipment is getting close to its end of life. So is it really worth keeping something that you're just going to have to start maintaining more and more and putting more money into it, or do you just replace it with new while everything's gutted?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, one of the other factors of that building is obviously it's a conversion to residential units. So you have to have some amenities spaces for all of those suites and those tenants. You see that picture, there's no balconies. So you have to be able to turn it into feasible spaces for the occupants. So we had to be creative with amenity spaces. There's a gym on the ground floor and a big rooftop patio on the upper levels, which, as structural will mention, it was a mechanical penthouse before, and we had to turn it into residential usability space. So it was a challenge. There's definitely a lot of challenges there, and to bring up the elevators all the way up to the roof, it's quite difficult. But yeah, we pulled it off. So that was basically 473 Albert, the first one. 2 years later, 23 is when we really started the second one, which was 360 Laurier. So as you can see here, these are old, obviously, drawings. Again, 1960s building, very similar floor space. It's a little bit narrower, a little bit longer in the back. So again, this one here is 139 units, same client, same developer. So what we had learned from the first one was applied to this one. There's a lot of things that we either cut out from the design. We didn't put a hot tub on this one because that was really complicated, and that was, oh my God, there's so much stories there. But yeah, so anyways, we ended up converting that one again. So these are renderings. This is currently in construction in the downtown core of Ottawa. You can see buildings next to it. These are urban settings. It makes a lot of sense. Terry's going to talk about a lot of the sustainability of buildings. Downtown construction is complicated. This is a very useful way to basically minimize the impact on the community. You are impacting it. You know, you have your traffic stops and all of that, but at least you have an infrastructure that you don't have to truck in and you know, pour new concrete. So that's a brief introduction of my project. So I'm not sure if you want to switch over to to yours.
So, 535 Leggett. Oh, thank you. Which front name, Bryce?
Just
The green one?
The only one that's on the thing?
yeah, basically.
Big green thing.
It's easy.
Intelligent, boys. Be careful, okay? So, let's backdate, I suppose, the story a little bit in terms of what and how come we chose the project. And I'm not necessarily looking from an engineering perspective. I'm looking from a developer's perspective and a math perspective. This project started a bunch of years ago when we looked at the older office building that we have, and contrary to Mark's project, this building's fairly new in office worlds. It's a Class A piece of office building. It's a glass metal curtain wall, and it was built in 2000. So this thing's like, it's 25 years old, so it makes no necessarily sometimes financial sense to look at this and say, is this up for a project like this? So when it came to sort of fruition from the math exercise, these lease terms were just coming due, and the mortgage was coming due. Finance rates were a little bit fluctuable at a stupid rate, and so timing was perfect for something like this. And then so what we did was we looked at, this is the actual office building. We called it our Tower C project. It was next to the hotel. We know the building very well. We have 4 of them identically. Same kind of footprint, same kind of stories, kind of deal. It's about a 10-story building. It's 120,000 squares of real estate. And what we decided was, is this a project possible for this kind of conversion? So one of our, we have our construction folks put together a team of amazing people, and there's a few of them in the room, so if the RECL boys don't get their heads swelling kind of thing, these guys are amazing for us. They've been very good in terms of, they're like construction Google. So I don't type in Google what I need to know. I just call the boys from RECL, and they're amazing in terms of what's possible from a costing perspective, from a design perspective, what's, all of this kind of stuff. Going into these projects, we've built many office buildings, and from a personal perspective, we've built malls and I myself, shopping centers, and been involved, but never in this conversion project. So we had to build this team. We got an architect out of Montreal, and then we got RECL on board, and we started having conversations if this was possible at all. And then it sort of, we were looking for, when can we stop? No, we go to the next level. No, we go to the next level. And next thing you know, we get some schematics, drawings, et cetera. So this is the site itself. It's right next door to the Brook Street Hotel in Canada. If you haven't been, please visit. There's about 3 or 4 acres of property there. And I'll talk a little bit how we're going to integrate that with the full service spectrum with our hotel complex in a moment. But, classic site. So the question is, will people rent, and this is what the $1 million question is, or the $100 million, whatever the budget's going to be, are people going to rent an apartment in the middle of Canada North in an industrial park kind of deal, in an office feel, right? And that was the big question. Has to do with design, has to do with location, has to do with services, all of this stuff. So we're again, looking every day, looking for another, what we're gonna do, is it possible? So we always go back to will and can we rent this? So basically we got a bunch of schematics. This is the ground floor. I don't expect you guys to see this or getting into detail, but this is the ground floor. There's a bit of retail on one side, and then there's some community access spaces here. We're also looking at a potential service sort of merge with the hotel. So there's going to be a common area with a kitchen, and it's going to be a bit of a commercial teaching kitchen kind of deal, because our hotel folks got a bunch of professional chefs over there, wine pairings, sommeliers, all that kind of good stuff. So you're going to be able to actually take the services of the hotel and bring it over to this residential play. Now, in this particular case, we've actually linked the two properties as well. Underground for a parking scenario and above ground for services. So this is going to be a full suite in terms of if you want a grilled cheese sandwich, some Cabernet Sauvignon, and you want your apartment cleaned and your dry cleaning, I can do it all. It's amazing. Just it's one meal deal. It's like McDonald's, only a little more costly. We also got some backbone from a technology perspective to drive this. So we looked at the POS system, and not to get to bore everybody here, but you're going to be able to do this with no humans. So your visa is going to be online. You're going to call, and it's not going to call. You can actually order everything online in terms of a app, and that's going to automatically get pushed into the POS system at the hotel. That hotel then gets popped in the point of sale, and that goes to our service department, and the service will actually bring that over to your suite at the apartment. So a little different kind of play here, and I think it's going to be cool, and it's going to work quite well actually. To add to that, we also have a little bit of an office play here down in the bottom side of things, in terms of if you're there and you want to have work from home, hybrid kind of thing. So we're trying to create this flexible hybrid space for that potential client who's going to rent and lease the apartment. Yeah, this is really, really well done. So this is just a general layout here. King size, queen size, that kind of deal. And they range from studios up to, we have 4 large penthouse suites that are on the corner of this unit, this building, sorry, and they're going to be probably 2,000 square footish. And there's going to be a multi-level there. There's going to be a patio, and so we have a range from a lower, say we'll call it a medium kind of end, to a very high-end kind of scenario. So here's the renderings. So you look at what it was before, this green, circa Elvis-y kind of building before, to a really, really cool kind of look. And we have the Juliet balconies because we have that structural. Funny enough, you can't just put stuff on the side of a building. Who knew? So now we couldn't put the structure on, the cost, etc. So we had these Juliet balcony situations. And what you see here on the lower one is that penthouse suite. So there's going to be a little balcony on 4 of the corners on the second level, and there's going to be heated patio, and there's going to be a barbecue available. So it's going to be fairly higher end units. Before and after kind of thing. So quite the difference and change. One of the things that the designers were really looking at is, how do we separate ourselves from an office building? How do we not look like an office building, but you're in an office building kind of park? And so I think they've done an amazing job with it, with the whole concept in terms of creating that difference. So it really looks like it was intentionally going to be designed as a residential place, so which is kind of cool. And this is what some things we're really proud of. We came up at the beginning of this, and I beat this drum quite a bit in our office in terms of a conversion and a sustainability path. It's not done. And I say that is, I went everywhere trying to find ways that we could actually be more sustainability orientated. How can we reduce carbon? How can we understand the embedded carbon that we have? And how can we do a better job? We've been recycling for years. We have huge amounts of digital capacity in our real estate portfolio in terms of the office side of things, and we've been at that space for many, many years. This is residential. I don't know exactly how it works, but I do know I don't want anything to go into the landfill. So we came out, and it was a struggle, I guarantee you. Nobody wanted this to happen in terms of, we don't do this before, so I don't know what to do. And it wasn't that they didn't want to, but they were unsure of how this was going to happen. So we had a little committee set up, and we're certainly learning as we go in terms of what and how we're going to do things. But at the end of the day, how do we reduce energy? How do we do, and this is big on procurement now and diversion and from the landfill. So what we did was there was a 4 or 5 prod plan here. There was one on procurement of how was our construction company going to procure things that are just better for the environment. Now, the key part is we're not driving through just a tree hugger mentality, okay? And because that's going to cost a lot of money, and that was a fear. Like, it's going to drive the cost up, Terry, 25 or 40%, yada, yada, yada. How about if we give the option to the subcontractors to bring back and give us some ideas? And we're in the middle of that, by the way, but we got some really, really cool ideas in terms of our subcontractors and how to do it. Likewise, our architect was very, very good in this too as well. They came to us with a plan. They have a department that helped this out, kind of thing. And so we went from a procurement place. We've done a diversion from the landfill. There was a circular economy piece, and I'll talk about that shortly as well. And there was an education piece that we're going to, push down through everybody that's going to be on the site. And then there's a documentation piece that we're going to try to, I'm going to write a white paper when this is done. We're going to publish that for anybody else who wants to have a look at what we did and the mistakes we made and what we would have done differently to say. So we're still evolving this. It's a bit of an organic play for us, but we're really, really proud of this. 40% reduction in energy consumption. Wow. 55% reduction in GHGs, and this is operational carbon of how we're going to do it. And there's a 75% materials recycled, concrete, metal, gypsum, wood. This is not going back in the landfill. This is recycled. This is reused. All of the glass, the curtain wall, we're going to repurpose it. So our architect and our ESG folks and our sustainability team have found contractors out there that can take the glass, for instance, grind it up, and put it in an aggregate for a paving. Wow, okay, excellent. So it's not going in the landfill. Now, we had to do some fancy jigging around in terms of bins and all kinds of good stuff like that, but we're getting there. Now, there's some cost savings. There's a, from a weight perspective, so the demo guys and, our trusted contractors are taking the logistics on for that, and I think it's working fairly well. I mean, we're learning as we go, but we're really, really proud of that. And in closing, I've taken a lot of time, but one of the things that we have in this building, I was telling you about our digital infrastructure, we're very adamant of how we're running our real estate in terms of the digital capacity. So we've been running artificial intelligence for a lot of years. We've been running data analytics and all this kind of good stuff. In order to do that, you need a backbone of technology. Now, it's an office building. How does that relate to the commercial side, the residential piece? So what we did was we got in and we got our guys to go in about a month. It's taken, and not even done yet. They took out all of the infrastructure, all the switches, all the gear, the HVAC stuff, the VAV boxes, the everything in terms of what can we reuse in our system. Nothing's going to the landfill. So we took another basement that we have in one of our other buildings, and we created an inventory system, a bunch of racks. I've always got at Costco somewhere. And basically what we did was, I think it was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars of material that we're going to reuse in our system. It's the same boxes. It's the same everything we use. Even the tiles, for instance, and the lights. What can we prevent from going into the landfill? So we needed to create a little bit of an inventory system, which we've done internally, to try to take all of this stuff. Now, we use our own labor as well. It's not easy if you went to a contractor because it's more of a cut and rip kind of scenario. So we had our own HR come in there, gave us an idea of what we need to do, and then we took every floor. And so now we have an electronics recycling, and then we have an HVAC side. And so now we have this inventory of systems in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that if we have any gear that goes within around our portfolio, we can reuse them. Like, again, our building automation system, our controllers, and all this kind of good stuff. So we're really, and again, learning as we go. As I say this, I got this plan. It's probably going to change today. As I go home, there's probably going to be movements to this, and I'm hopefully, when this is all done, and I'll close with this, I'm going to have this written down. And so I would hope that people can get on our website, people can get and understand and use this for good. We'll have our list of how we're doing this and what I would have avoided the next time. So anyway, if there's a contractor out there or whomever wants to get and take this document and make their project more sustainable and more green as well. So yeah, thank you.
Who's the architect?
Neuf Architects, Neuf, out of Montreal. Yeah. Neuf, sorry, yeah. I'm Newfoundlandese, so English is my second language there. So yeah.
And I think with that, like we can go, there's so much focus on sustainability, and that's like one direction you can, or evaluation that you can have on a building. But I know, Mark, there's a lot of other ways that you can evaluate existing office, what we have for office stock in Ottawa, right?
Right. Well, the main part of analyzing the building is getting in there early on, doing your due diligence. Have it like before purchasing the building. Have the team evaluate the building, walk it. There's due diligence periods by the time you for the purchase of the building. Have it experienced there. Have it longer than anticipated. You're going to do your studies. You're going to do your seismic analysis. You're going to do some environmental studies as well. We dealt with 1960s building. There's environmental problems. There's hazardous materials. So all that to say is, it's get in there early, do as much research as you can, and have the team evaluate the building. There's depending on the structural layout of columns, it may not be suitable to have suites of 2 bedrooms or 1 bedroom. So we got in there really early on. We were able to do concepts at an early stage and be able to determine whether or not these buildings are suitable for conversions to residential. And like I talked earlier, it was the amenity spaces was another challenge. We did what we could. There's zoning requirements. There's site plan agreement process, which is difficult on its own. The City of Ottawa is learning a lot on that process. They were involved in the second, or between the first and the second conversions. They adapted quite a bit to our program, or to what we were presenting to them. They provided a task force to be able to streamline the office to residential conversions in the downtown core. Obviously, I'm not sure how it was for you, Terry. But for us, the first one was a regular site plan control. We had to put in a cistern, and we were all wondering, why is there? It's an existing building. Why do you have to manage your site water?
Yeah, and there was a lot that went along with that, because in the end, we're not putting more stormwater. Like, our roof isn't changing, our footprint building, we're reusing everything. So the footprint of that storm isn't really changing. So that ended up being on the second project, on 360 Laurier, that they're like, as long as you don't change what you're putting into the system, we're dealing with everything that's existing and everything that's new into their storm system. So as long as you keep that number, and then we didn't have to put a storm cistern in an existing building, which is a challenge to get,
Needs to go in the basement.
Water sealed. No one wants the water coming out of there. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges on that one. But yeah, the city was very helpful, and they're seeing this as the potential benefits that you're seeing that outweigh kind of like, no, you have to reduce how much storm you're putting out to the system.
I think I'll add to this. Yeah. The city's learning, and this is new. It's new to us. So if you present this to the city, and the city's never done this before, there's a set of rules and regulations. So it's bureaucracy anyway, and now times 10 so there's patience on both sides. That as a developer, there's a timeline that I have to follow, but you bring this to the city, and they've never done this before. It doesn't check the boxes, man. So now it stops the process a little bit. So there's been a lot of give and take, and I think in a good way. And I think the city, there's a bit of a new restructuring there, and they're really trying hard to create a streamline effect to these projects, and even cost in lieu. There's a whole pile of things that we didn't fit, and so that I think is getting there. And one more thing before the question is our subcontractors, and I got to say a huge, a big thank you. Before these projects are going, we talk to our structural, Cunliffe, I'm not sure, and Rick, and G-Wall is here. So we called these people and asked, and can you give us some guidelines? And so before anything with pen was put to paper, we had the luxury of having this great relationship on things we should be looking to do and things probably stay clear of from a costing. So it's almost we reversed engineered before we actually started the building a little bit. And so the team that we started was very, very important to have these trusted contractors in your Rolodex. I just dated myself, in your BlackBerry or whatever it is you're using.
That's dating yourself
That's
too.
okay.
Very much
My iPhone 75 or whatever it is, okay? But it's so important to have these great contractors that you trust, that they've been with us for a lot of years, and it's such peace to have that backbone for us and say, maybe not go down this path because it's going to cost you X number of bazillion dollars, so maybe go this way. And so then we don't have to go down there, because I know already, because they've guided us like a Sherpa into a great design even before we put the pen to the paper. So it's good to have these trusted contractors, subcontractors for us. Anyway, this is our experience.
Yeah. No, and I think to Mark's point, like that's why you had to investigate the buildings ahead of time. Look at what systems there are, what are the limitations, what are the existing openings that you have to deal with. I know we had that on a couple of projects, but even from a mechanical systems, like what is there, how old is it? And for 360, we were able to reuse the boilers because they had just replaced it. Like, if there is equipment that just got replaced, is it really worth putting it to landfill? So it's doing that evaluation of what can we save, what system are you looking for, like what efficiencies, what's the goals for environmental sustainability, and trying to integrate that into that design in the end, trying to work with what's structurally there or architecturally there for an envelope, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Some questions?
Oh, sorry.
Is the city getting any breaks with fees or development charges for the conversions yet?
No hable. So
It's different in this, I'll say, Calgary is doing a phenomenal job with that. They have incentives. The city of Ottawa is learning. They are trying to get those programs in. I don't know if they're in yet.
they're not.
Okay.
And so, yeah, full stop. They're not. And I'll get to you in 2 seconds here. But I'll just get to the city of Calgary. The city of Calgary was going bankrupt. That's how bad that was. So they actually decided to give a massive incentive from a grant perspective to the developer, and it paid off exponentially. You need access to money for that. And our city, we're not there yet, and it's a really initiative that I don't know if we're prepared yet. We're just willing, if the city wants to cut us some breaks in terms of speed, like how quick can we process it? I'm not asking for the lotto ticket here. I'm just asking for a couple of bucks. And we're trying, and we're not quite there yet. And I think after we get some momentum, we get a couple of projects going, I think the city will start learning a little bit. And I think it's going to get there. It may not very well get to the Calgary level, because that will take a full financial restructuring of the city, which I'm not sure we're prepared for. But yeah, I wish, because I'll tell you, a lot more projects would go ahead. And the housing crisis, I mean, there's a bunch of great things can happen. And likewise, and I'll close with this one, we're not in that dire of strait from a leasing perspective. These guys were at 30-40% vacancy, and these office towers were billions of dollars in terms of amortizations and banks. So they had 3 or 4 levels of government, 3 or 4 levels of financing going after and understanding that the risk of this portfolio and this whole downtown section is in dire straits everywhere. So there's a lot of levels trying to push. We're not there yet, which is good for us, I suppose. Another question?
Repurposing these brutalist buildings, from a heritage standpoint, how do you navigate that? Are you reusing the actual envelope of the building and putting the structure on the outside, or how is that working?
It's an excellent question. In our case, the first one, 473 Albert, we ended up removing, because it's all precast panels from the 60s. So for us, brutalist building, interesting architecture. And then what we had to do was, or the intent for the client was to add, bigger windows, sliding doors, Juliet balconies. So we ended up removing some of those panels. At first we did the analysis, we looked at it, we said, okay, well that panel looks bad, that panel looks bad, that panel looks bad. But it doesn't work, it didn't work for us necessarily in a math perspective for the design. So, but we did end up, opening up on the front facade only. We didn't do it on the back facade, but to create that integration of architecture into the existing building as best as we could. I think we did a good job. I hope. But to be honest, the buildings were not designated as heritage either. But from the architect's point of view, we like to reuse, and it's there. It's a beautiful building. We just gave it a second life. It's 60 years old. We just gave it hopefully another 60, and then who knows where it's going to go from that one. The second one was a little bit less of intervention from the facade point of view. Again, remove all of the insulation inside was about this thick, so we improved a lot by building a new envelope or new insulation, waterproofing from the inside. Basically, we were bringing that up to hopefully modern code with more efficiencies of the building.
Helped a lot with the heating and cooling load calculations that you needed for each suite, and to be able to bring enough. But
but we, and that building, again, because of the size of those windows, we had to add more windows to make the suites feasible. And so we, the way it was broken down is like every precast panel had 3 windows. One window was a solid block, but we ended up cutting those out and creating more windows out of it. So again, the building itself was not heritage designated, but trying to, from the street perspective, trying to make it more interesting and give it life, because it's a residential building now. So we like color at Linebox, and we definitely like, we had some animation of the front on the street level. There will be color film on that one too, and you saw it from the 473 photos. The lobby is interesting. It's not just an office building. So it creates more life, and for the residents to come by and say, "Oh, this is my home now." So
I want to talk about embedded carbon just before you go. We have a bit of a struggle in terms of trying to maintain the heritage factor and SP10 energy rules. Nobody talks about embedded carbon. So you have a building that's been built for 60 or 80 years, whatever it is. That carbon's already accounted for. What we're doing now is we're designing based on energy only and not necessarily using a calculation for any embedded carbon. If there was evolution in our municipalities, in our building code, to understand a benefit for using and reusing some of this stuff so we don't have to buy new. And the glass metal curtain walls, like just 500 or 600 pieces of glass, can't use it. And it's a right thing to do. I'm not saying that, but the embedded carbon, we've already, that ship has sailed. So there should be some benefit of that from a calculation perspective, and it's not right now. So unfortunately, if you had, the brutalist building you said, there's no calculation or anything to keep that outside of the heritage designation. If we could evolve and mature our sustainability goals in terms of how we look at it, and it won't be in my lifetime, by the way, but we can dream, that we can say, yeah, this building already had a run here. The embedded carbon is X, and there should be some benefits to that. And how can we calculate, and maybe not necessarily change, but maybe deviate from the SP10 rules or the energy rules to understand, guys, we don't need to buy brand new stuff. Let's recycle what we got and give us some benefits of that. So, and again, hopefully down the road we'll see some evolution like that. So the design may be different, and we can actually protect some of this stuff, and not necessarily under heritage designation, but from an embedded carbon designation.
Yeah. And I think part of that is that we aren't talking apples to apples when we're talking embodied carbon right now. There's a lot of research, there's a lot of initiatives right now into embodied carbon, but there's not really agreed upon terms quite yet or agreed upon standards to do that. So that's something that's in development. It's part of the conversation. I think we've been talking about let's decarbonize for so long, and it's been a lot of, okay, we'll make the envelope better, okay, we'll reduce how much gas we're using, but I think that's going to shift. That is always a goal, but there's also this whole other aspect on what is in our building, what's the cost of bringing these things to site, what's the cost of pouring concrete to decarbonization. And I think that's just a conversation we're seeing more and more often these days.
You have a question, Ann?
You mentioned earlier about the sanitary penetration, so that's actually quite an increase in sanitary
Extremely.
waste that has to be managed. Is the existing infrastructure actually upgraded?
100%. I mean, if you think of, it's both water and sanitary. If you think of a typical office building, you've got the two male and female washroom on each floor. That's all you have. That's a dozen fixtures per floor. And now you're going to a dozen, or at least 6 fixtures per unit. And however many units you have for a floor plate, it's going to increase the amount of water that each use. Everyone's going to wake up and take a shower, so suddenly you need that much water. There was probably no showers in the existing building, office buildings, right? So you have to look at upgrading the incoming water typically. Sometimes it's fine because of the fire suppression system has it large enough. But between that and the sanitary going out, storm is still the same size typically. But we're seeing a lot of our projects, we're seeing a lot of buildings that are over 50 years old. So it's like, are you even going to reuse this existing sanitary or water system anyways? It's at end of life. Do you really want to come back after in another 20 years when everything's falling apart and rip it all out again? So it's generally recommended.
You're there, you're in the building, it's or half demolished. It's time to do it. You know, you give that second life to that building. It's a longer process. It's going to survive much longer. Yeah. I recommend doing it now.
Though, to your point about sanitary, the other thing is that we don't always have the floor-to-floor heights because we have now long runs of sanitary, and we want as high ceilings as possible.
Yes.
You know, everyone wants that in their unit. So how can we? That usually means more holes. You go vertically instead of horizontally. So it's a different challenge, but there are hopefully, knock on wood, you've got a higher ground floor that you can offset all your drainage on that floor. But it's working within the existing slab and structure. There can be reinforcing required because there's so many new holes. It's not just risers, it's all your toilets, your bathtubs, all those kinds of things. So yeah.
And once you open up the ceilings, you see what's there. You know, in 473's case, we had a perimeter concrete beam around the entire building, and you know, we had to get exhausts in and intakes, and so we had to obviously go around those beams. We can't cut through them, so we had to be creative. You know, ductwork goes up, back up, and around and into the window. So yeah, it was what you find in the ceilings. Even like you want the higher ceilings, but in the end, some of them had bulkheads, which we eliminated for the second one.
You're only as good as your as-built, and sometimes as-built aren't as accurate to site. It happens. You've got a newer building, thank goodness.
That don't mean I got as-built.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask just add to this insurance. So we have some insurance folks here. Insurance is driving a lot of this from a risk mitigation. The water is the new fire perspective now. So we're looking at how do we minimize water damage, potential water damage during the construction and during the actual phase once it's finished as well. So we're actually getting trying to understand what risk from a risk mitigation perspective and how we can design to minimize insurance. And so it's a different perspective, but we got some really smart insurance folks to help us out, and we're looking at how we can change things. Now, we don't understand some of this stuff and why they want to do it, but hey, so we're looking at water shutoff valves and these E-valves and a whole pile of cool technology to add to all of that. If indeed after a certain date the insurance will mandate, we're not going to insure your building unless you do it all new. So there's those discussions were being had too as well. So yeah. Correct. Yeah. In many cases, I mean, there's even some products out there now that we were talking about last week about dishwashers. It comes in with it already built in the dishwasher. So if you can, buy that dishwasher kind of thing, right? And we've been running in our office portfolio. We've been running the evals from a technology perspective for many, many years, and it's tied into our building automation system, and it determines there's a bit of an algorithm that goes, and it's a flow rate. And so after so much flow, the problem is with residential space. So how and when do that flow rate, how do we determine that? It's pretty easy on a sprinkler. Open, close, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. But you got 25 people in the morning taking a shower, and then on Saturday they don't take a shower. Do they shut the valve off? Like so we're not sure. We're sort of learning as we go. But the technology is, again, evolving as we speak, and we're trying to come up with a solution. And it's not easy, by the way. And we're trying to come up with a solution. Again, we're trying to tie it into the building automation system. So the expertise that we have in an office building and the technology backbone, the OT background, I don't know anything about it at a residential place. So I'm having to learn a little bit more, I can't talk the language very well. We're getting there.
You're learning.
How does the accessibility work? Does it still
I mean, from an architect's point of view, you have to, yes. There's 15% required by code, at different types of units. So, you know, if you have 1 bedrooms, you have to have 15%. Now, we were able to, you know, maneuver around that in a tricky way with the city. It still meets codes, you know, we were able to meet those. Now, corridor access, you know, your corridor width it's a public corridor, it has to meet the code requirements, and that's basically your width for accessibility.
And I think that also goes back to what's your floor plate look like? Like, how do you fit in these larger units with your mix that you're trying to meet? You always have goals for what appeals to whatever you're trying to target audiences for these. So it's like, how do you fit it in? It's a jigsaw puzzle.
Yep. And you know, 473 at the ground floor had a bunch of ramps, and you know, to be able to get into the building, because it was a sunken entrance. Well, we filled all of that in because the Albert Street does slope, you know, east to west a little bit. So we moved the entrance, you know, so to be able to accommodate accessibility in that building and have a flat floor plate on the ground floor. Other point of accessibility was the rooftop. Every resident has to have access to all amenities, including you know, people in you know, wheelchair access throughout. So we extended the elevator shaft up an extra floor. Not easy to do.
And guess what? They took the mechanical penthouse.
Yeah, they took that away from you.
It becomes
Sorry.
public amenity. No,
Yes.
and then a lot of it is because we don't necessarily need we don't need the air handlers that an office building does. Usually they have a central air handling system in the penthouse, and then we have heating and cooling plants. But yeah.
So the footprint of that mechanical penthouse went from this
Giant,
big
yeah.
to much smaller, and condense it in much smaller area to be able to give more amenity space to the residents. But you know, talking about accessibility, you know, my hot tub story of 473 Albert, you know, accessibility for hot tub as well. So there's a lift, you know, that's added there to get to the platform. Now, adding a hot tub in an existing building that's not designed for it. A new building, you can, you know, pour new concrete beams and you know, reinforce it in the structure itself. This is a 60s building. It's, you know, 8-inch slab throughout. So, you know, the location of that was very tricky. It has its own hexoskeleton underneath to be able to support that, to transfer the loads back to the columns. Again, you know, I'm not sure if Brian is here, but anyways, he was our structural engineer on board, and yeah, he had to work a lot of magic to make that one work. And I'll tell you, we didn't do it for the second one. I don't think it was worth it. There was a lot of cost to that one.
We went a different route,
Yeah.
and this was, and I'll tell a quick story. CMHC financing, when you go for financing for these buildings, you can go for a designation, and it requires some points. And there's an energy bunch of points, but there's an accessibility set of points. And you talk about, I think if I learned anything, and if I could put this in a box kind of deal. So we hired the Rick Hansen Foundation to review our plans. It was the most eye-opening experience of my life in terms of what is important and what's not, and what we should do and what we can't do. And we started, and it was for financing. That's what it was for first. And then it evolved to something, what's the right thing to do? And we started making decisions based on accessibility, and we tried to increase the numbers of the apartments that we can convert. So there's a minimum amount of requirement, but if we're doing it, let's try it anyway kind of deal. So we're in that middle now, and they provided some really cool information in terms of what we should be looking at. And so my only wish was I talked to them before we started this process. I could have changed things. And the difference is between this and this, it's immaterial to me, but it means so much to the accessibility folks. And so, you know, where the tile are being laid, can we take these cupboards out and put, you know, there's thousands of things. And if we'd done it in the pre-design, it would have been so much easier to do. So we can make so many more apartments accessible than we originally had. So I think the learning on this one, the Rick Hansen Foundation, they're amazing folks. They'll come back and they'll write your drawings up. They'll say, look, maybe you should do this and do that. And I'll tell you, notoriously, the architects have that in their head anyway. Okay, that's how they design. And so it's already taken care of, but it's just this little bit more will make such a big difference. And in our case, we have one of our employees, her godson has cerebral palsy. And I go out and I'm telling this story, and you know, and she comes back and she writes me this email, and it was heartwarming, I'll tell you. It's just to say, look, It's more than just a place to live. And as designers and as contractors, we're making homes. And so if we can make that a little bit more accessible, if we can make that change from a 36 to a 38, that person can have such an easier life. And you know, we don't, and again, I look at it now like that, but before I'm looking at it as a number. And so it was a finance play for me, right? It's math. But it's so much more than math now. So, I mean, I think the next project we do will certainly have a different sort of vibe to it, understand that process before we go into it. I think it's really, really important. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just wondering how you treat your contingency on the project. On a regular project, right, the unknowns are under the ground, but you've already got your structure, you don't have your as-built. Do you treat contingency the same way that you would on a new build? And then further to that, how do the costs, new build versus office present versus rent per square foot end up lining up? Do they, like, the conversation right now is there is a huge savings, but is there actually, like, not a lot of data points out there for people who've gone through this process?
Well, I can't talk about the costs, but I can tell you that they're doing it for a reason. It is beneficial to do it. Your cost per square foot is down, but it depends on the purchase price of the building. If you're getting a good deal, you're going to be able to save down the line. Your contingency has to be higher than expected, or higher than a new build, because there's unknowns. You're going in there, you don't know what's behind the ceiling, you don't know what's behind the walls. You could do tests. You can open up some areas and be able to explore. Doesn't mean it's the same in one scenario that it is in the other. When we fully demolished the exterior wall, from the inside, we fully demolished the exterior wall, and you know, you do an analysis of the precast panels there. Oh, there's missing bolts everywhere. Yeah, those are things that nobody knew about, and nobody is expecting either. But so plan ahead and have a higher contingency. What's the percentage wise? I don't know. We have to all work together and be able to determine that, you know, in a smart way. But I think, to be honest, if I look at the cost of a new build now per square foot versus the cost of these two buildings in the downtown, again, different types of building from Terry's, it's phenomenal, the cost, the difference.
Are there certain elements of due diligence, like certain things that you wish you had opened up before that are critical?
Always. And I think that was what we had done from between our first project and our second project, where we really took it out of that saying, let's see as much as we can. Yeah. What ceilings can you take down? What walls are you willing to cut giant, you know, holes open in?
And they were vacant buildings.
Yeah.
Like it was a vacant office building. So by the time, you know, the last occupant has moved out, okay, now you have the longer due diligence period, which, you know, they agreed with the owners of the building and the developer. Okay, can we get in there and do our environmental assessment right away? Yes, of course, because there's nobody there. So it depends on the vacancy of the building. But yeah, we're able to do that.
And I think the other thing that I've always heard is that you can get started so quickly with an existing building because you're not pouring your floors and that kind of thing. There's no trucks for that. I think we talked about that earlier. But you can just start demolishing, and if you demolish one floor, you can technically start installing as soon as it's demolished. So that's what I've heard in terms of schedule, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I'll add to that. Contingency is an evolution, and I think because of the speed of which we want to try to ramp this up, it was a moving target because we didn't get, say, for instance, in our particular job, we didn't get the elevator report back. We were in the process of it, and then the elevator come back and said, well, we need a new elevator mod.
Yeah.
Well, holy crap, that was $930,000 they didn't account for, right? Holy shit. So then now, sorry. Ooh. So, yeah, sorry. Yeah. We're not in church.
It's okay.
And so, if indeed, like we didn't know that, but it was because of how we were pushing through. So we had to evolve. Now, and I'll talk a little bit about the finance. I don't know if there's any bankers in the room, but the cap rates on a residential play is so much more aggressive than an office play. So it's going to be worth a whole lot more when you're done. And so the valuation folks will come back and say that. So there's always a little bit of room to play with the contingency. The thing is, the contingencies are, we work with a bunch of really great professionals whose job it is to stick us on budget, okay? And they're really passionate about it's going to be this, guys. This is not going to happen. But who can play with who knew about the elevator? So you can have all the crystal balls in the world. At the end of the day, you need to have flexibility in your financing. You need to have flexibility in your professionals to understand that contingency is going to move, and it is what it is, right? And so if I looked at the costing model, the building's going to be worth more at the end of the day. And so if you looked at it per square foot ways, I don't have that math either. But from a carbon reduction strategy, from a sustainability, from a valuation perspective, the math is very, very sound. And it's great to have in our portfolio as well.
Two questions. First one is progressive design build best approach to such a project, and what is the window valuation some of the
Design build. I think the first one was definitely a tender job. Lots of lessons learned. The second one was a design build with a contractor on board. It was a lot smoother that way. They get in right away. They can evaluate, and they have a lot of input on the budget costs and contingency as well too. So you could do either way. I think you could tender the job, but in the end, what's your pocketbook going to look like at the end? You may have a better benefit of bringing in GC right away, bringing a construction team, working with you along the way, with the architects, with the engineers, because they can get in right away with us and do the investigation.
They can also help develop what the pinch points are in the construction, even with schedule. If if we need to get here then can we change the design a little bit to be able to facilitate that? Yeah, there's some benefits there for sure.
And what was your question?
The second one?
the valuation timeframe that you use for your valuation?
So I'm not sure I understand the question, but
10 years? Is it 15 years?
Oh, it's 100,000 years if you can. So there's companies out there that do this for a living, and so you hire these companies from a financing modeling perspective, and that's how your construction sort of it's progressive kind of deal. And we've predetermined the value of the building before it actually is built, and then we're pretty well dead on. And what most companies will do, if they're smart, they'll refinance the minute that it's all operational and done. When they get out of that construction phase, they'll refinance into a term that sort of fits their amortization. And I was telling you, not to bore everybody with bankers, but the CMHC financing is very flexible in that. So CMHC is amazing when it comes to the residential housing, by the way. You can extend the term of your amortization with CMHC financing. So it goes from 25 to 35 years perhaps, and likewise you can adjust rates. So if you looked at your prime plus 1, prime plus 2, they'll actually knock off half a point, 3/4 of a point to actually adjust your amortization rates, and they can adjust your amortization length based on the valuation. So it tends to try to help you with cash flow at the onset of a project, which makes it so much more risk. You're willing to take that risk, a little burden, so the contingencies will play. So it's a few extra dollars. Okay, I had that allowed for, and then what we'll do is most companies should refinance the minute that they get it operational, to get and understand the cash flow after you get it ramped up after a year or two, right? Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Kinda.
to some degree, because for example, the energy calculations and investment in the envelope and mechanical systems and the return on that. And that goes also to how your business model is about that, the utilities and how you manage do it all inclusive. Is that the best strategy from your experience?
So for us, I'll just talk real quick about we made decisions based on energy calculations, and so the capital costs were based on the CMHC finding those points for energy. And so it was a very much more complex system that I would be normally choosing, but we're learning as we go, right? So all of that's built into the capital, and it's based on, I get so much more savings from the CMHC financing than I do with the capital investment of the, whatever it is, the whatever the system we're putting in for the heating system kind of thing, right? VRF system? Yeah, or VRF system, yeah.
And it really depends, like energy modeling and that kind of thing, what the goals are with the project are, what system are you putting in, like are you going for CMHC, what existing equipment are you keeping? If you can, though, that if you have a chiller that just replaced, boiler, like you're going to keep those items. How does that evaluate into the cost? You're going to be improving the envelope a lot, but in the end, yeah, you're just trying to, I don't think we've come at it from a how much you're going to get back or that kind of thing perspective, or what you're saving. Your energy cost, you've got a lot more people in the building than you did before in terms of office to residential for the most part.
But you're also, you know, it's a residential unit. The costs are transferred back to the tenants. It's on their utilities bill, right? So depending on the systems that you put in. So the residents do want a more efficient building so that it reduces their cost of living as well too. So.
You have a question?
When's the forecast getting everything done?
Yeah. So we want to be 2026, 2027. So we're hoping completion. Yeah. So it's 18 months theoretically after we start, when we get our building permit and all that kind of good stuff. So that's just like the contingency-ish.
Yes.
We're hoping 18 months, and spring 2027 perhaps we can start ramping up the leasing. In theory,
Yeah. We're about the same timeline. Yeah, it was about the same. So basically, by the time, I mean, again, the purchase of the building 2023, first occupancy should be 2025. Like so, late fall. This year, late summer, early fall is first occupancy. Now we're doing phased occupancy. Just be able to use rent right away, provide some income. So.
When you're basing your accessibility and energy criteria, I guess I don't know if you guys are using CHG or only using it. Are you guys basing it on the existing building stream or the new construction? Because we were changing use from commercial to residential.
Your base building is still residential. Yeah, you're not going from the existing. You're comparing it apples to apples. Yeah. And yeah, we went for both of them, I think, or just this one.
No, I don't think so.
No, not at all. Okay.
No.
Sorry, I thought we had.
But yeah, you design to the codes. For us, it was building codes requirements. Building code is it's on paper. You do have to, it's an existing building. You're using your Part 11 assessments of existing stairwells that do not conform to current code. So everything has to be reevaluated a little bit in terms of the existing building when it comes to energy and that's not my domain, but to be honest, the envelope is increased greatly to what it was, so you're much more efficient to that.
And there were some client goals on those two projects for energy efficiency. It wasn't CMHC, obviously, but there were a lot of goals for that. And that was just their own, what are we giving back to the tenants, and what are we going to be owning long term as well?
I mean, to be honest, you have to look at or ask that question to the owners, but it's not the lowest cost of the market out there. They do advertise them as luxury apartments. Okay, take that with a grain of salt. Yes, exactly. So I'm going to say no, but to be honest, I have another project that is to affordable market value. So it depends on the project. In this case here, it was clear that the client wanted luxury, because your market is the downtown core office. You have some diplomats maybe in the area that live in their building, so you do have that. For them, again, they have all sorts of different target people out there, but in this case, it was downtown core is pretty expensive, so you can imagine how much rent is. So, yeah.
Well, considering parking for these areas, you're using the existing parking lots.
Yep.
Is there a certain amount of electric car charge they have to put in per unit, and how is that going to be charged to the unit or per user?
I mean, typically they put in electric charging stations. It's part of the full building electrical upgrade typically. There is a certain amount mandated for new builds. It depends on the owner how much they're going to prioritize that for. Who are they expecting to come in? Who are they trying to appeal to? Most of them, I'm pretty sure you have to, like, you pay for it on the station itself. You'd need, it's how much you want to invest in a POS system that could actually go back to the unit itself.
I'm glad you asked.
I was about to say. Oh, yeah.
10 years ago, we put about 56 EV chargers in our portfolio, so every person, if they wanted to, can access if you're leasing space with KRP. So we've been sort of down this road, and we've been waving this flag for quite some time. We do have it built in for redundant conduit for future. We have well over the minimum. The thing is, with this one, we can put it back if you're, you should have a little bit of priority to as well. So if you're in spot 56 and it's charged to you, it's not a problem. Go right to your particular account. We use ChargePoint software now, which actually is individual too as well. So you just go up to it, swing your card, actually your app, and it goes right to your Visa as well. So the software is really, really powerful. And they're all the same kind of deal. So yeah, it's pretty well, it's a great thing. We're hoping that it'll spawn more. Unfortunately, build it and they will come is not necessarily something for EV cars. We haven't seen the uptake. We do get a little bit, and we're getting a little bit more, but certainly not where we need to be. But we're anticipating future growth for sure, and we're building it into our design a little bit.
Yeah, same with us. We provided, future proofing to add more electrical parking, and lucky for us, we had 2 buildings that did have underground parking for us in the downtown core. They're very tight, but they were there, they're existing, and we are able to reuse what we can. Thank you.
Alrighty, we're pretty much to time. We're just at time.
Yeah.
We good?
Okay. Well, thank our speakers, Marc-Andre, Adrienne, and Terry, on behalf of the OCA, and our speakers gift sponsor, C&M Electric, and we'll have a gift for you to please accept as a token of our gratitude. Thanks for coming, everyone, and for your questions, and enjoy your lunch.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.